hard to wait for all the things that I want. Sometimes I kinda feel like it's just taking too long to get the things I want, what I think I need, but I know you know what's best for me. I'm gonna live what I believe. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working. I'm gonna have patience, cause it'll be worth it. I'm gonna have faith, I know you have a purpose. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working on me. Still working on me. I know that sometimes I just need to slow down and trust that you are working all of this out. You know the things I want, what I think I need, but I know you know what's best for me. I'm gonna live what I believe. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working. I'm gonna have patience, cause it'll be worth it. I'm gonna have faith, I know you have a purpose. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working on me. Still working on me. I'm gonna hold up, slow down. I'm gonna trust that you're working it out. I'm gonna hold up, slow down. I'm gonna trust that you're working it out. I'm gonna hold up, slow down. I'm gonna trust that you're working it out. I'm gonna hold up, slow down. I'm gonna trust that you're working it out. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working. I'm gonna have patience, cause it'll be worth it. I'm gonna have faith, I know you have a purpose. I'm gonna wait, cause I know you're still working on me. Still working on me. Still working on me.
The first step will be to mix together precisely 1 cup of sugar with 1/2 cup of softened butter.
Got it. 1 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of butter. Oh, hi there. I'm in a baking class over the internet.
What was that, Graham?
Oh, nothing. I'm doing a thing.
Can you mute yourself, please?
Yeah, sorry. My instructor is teaching us how to bake a cake from scratch. It won't take long, so you just have a little patience and I'll be right.
You should be done mixing the sugar and butter together, so let's move on.
Ah! Patience is waiting until later for what you want now.
After you've stirred in the eggs, add 2 teaspoons of vanilla.
Gotta catch up. How much vanilla did she say? Hold on a sec. Excuse me. Excuse me, what? Pardon. How much vanilla did you say?
2 teaspoons, Graham, and then you add cups of flour and milk.
What was that? I'm sorry. I missed that last part. I think you're frozen. Hello? You're frozen. Maybe I'm frozen. Maybe we're both frozen. I really don't like it when technology fails me. I'm trying to bake a cake here and you're just... And I have to wait until it unfreezes before I can make my cake. You know, sometimes we have to wait for things when we really, really don't want to. Just like in today's story. And sometimes, also like in today's story, we don't wait. I am making this cake. How much milk and flour did she say? I don't know. We'll see you soon. Oh! Yeah. Yeah.
The Bible. It's 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry that fit together to form God's one big story. The epic adventure of how He created us and loves us so much that He made a way to rescue us. As we travel through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we discover people who met God and found their lives changed forever. Now, for an amazing story inspired by the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 24 through 34.
When Abraham's son Isaac grew up, he married a girl named Rebecca. But it didn't seem as though they'd be able to have children.
Please, God, give us children.
But God answered Isaac's prayers, and Rebecca became pregnant with twins.
Isaac, I'm pretty sure they're having a wrestling match in here.
Oh, definitely boys.
Rebecca asked God about the struggle she could feel. He told her,
2 nations are in your body. One nation will be stronger than the other. The older son will serve the younger one.
When it was time for the babies to be born, they came out fighting. Esau was born first. He came out with a strong set of lungs and a head full of red hair. His brother Jacob was born moments later, still holding on to Esau's heel.
How on earth did he manage that?
The brothers shared the same birthday, but as they grew, that was about the only thing they had in common. Esau loved to roam far out into the wilderness.
I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more.
Jacob preferred the comforts of home.
The sun is so hot. I'll just take a little nap in the tent.
Esau loved to hunt wild animals.
That is one excellent wildebeest.
Jacob preferred a different type of hunting.
Not you, not you. Ha! The perfect ripe honeydew melon.
One fine morning, Esau headed out into the wilds in search of adventure and some nice, juicy venison.
I'll feast tonight.
But Esau went all morning without spotting a single rabbit.
Ugh, should have packed a lunch.
In the afternoon, he tracked a deer for hours, but he missed his chance as the deer sprang away.
Ah!
At last, Esau headed for home, defeated. He was tired and irritated and so hungry he could eat an entire woolly mammoth.
Must eat food.
As Esau neared camp, a delicious smell wafted out to greet him.
Food!
Jacob had been home all day, resting and plucking his favorite herbs from his garden.
A little coriander, some dill.
As evening approached, Jacob used his savory herbs to whip up a tasty red lentil stew and a batch of fresh, buttery bread.
This will crisp up nicely on the hot stones.
By the time Esau had arrived in camp, Jacob's stew was simmered to perfection, and the bread was hot and crusty.
Food! Food!
Esau lunged for the stew cauldron, ready to grab a bowl, but Jacob blocked his path.
Not so fast.
Step aside, I'm hungry.
Clearly.
Just let me have some of that red stew.
Certainly.
Esau tried to dive for the stew pot again.
Just one itty-bitty thing.
What?
Well, first, give me the rights that belong to you as the oldest son.
Esau spent more time listening to his stomach than his brain. So in that moment, his stomach won out.
Look, I'm dying of hunger. If I die, those rights are pointless anyway. Now give me that stew.
Esau sprang forward once more.
Promise to give me your rights.
Fine.
Fine what?
Fine, I promise.
Promise what?
I promise to give you my rights as the oldest.
Cool. Help yourself.
Jacob stepped aside as Esau hurled himself at the stew pot.
Stew!
Esau happily gorged himself on rich stew and fresh bread. But as his stomach filled up, he had time to stop and think again. Esau had just traded the rights of a lifetime for a meal that would only last him a few hours.
Let me give you a little advice. Don't bake angry. Instead of making a cake, you end up making a mess. That's what happens when you lose patience. You make choices you normally wouldn't make and it ends up costing you. Losing patience ended up costing Esau his birthright. His brother Jacob ended up being in the family line of Jesus, so who knows what all Esau missed out on by being impatient. When we don't learn to have patience, we get frustrated easier. With ourselves, with others, with technology. There's really nothing good that can come from being impatient. So think about that when you're waiting for your turn on a video game, or when you're waiting to say something while someone else is talking, or when you're waiting for the internet to hurry up and start working again. Having patience is better than losing it. Slow down. Or you could hurt yourself or someone else. Or you could end up covered in cake batter. Here's the one thing to remember today. If you don't wait, it could cost you. If you need help waiting, ask someone you trust to come alongside you and see.
Are you there?
Oh. You're not frozen anymore. I lost you there for a minute.
Technical difficulties. I see. How's your cake?
I think I'm gonna need another lesson.
Very well. Same time next week?
Sure, I can wait. I may have the place cleaned up by then.
Pardon?
Nothing, it's a thing. I'll see you next time. So, how much flour was I supposed to use?
2 cups. How much did you use?
All of it.
No, that was wrong.
Okay.
I want to be rich. I want to be cool.
I want to be pretty.
I want to be successful.
I want to be cool. I want to be powerful.
I want to be rich.
I want to be popular.
I want to be clever.
I want to be successful.
I want to be pure.
I want to be heartbroken.
I want to be merciful.
I want to be humble.
I want to be hungry.
I want to be gentle. I want to be a peacemaker.
I want to be persecuted.
Just be.
Have you ever noticed how almost everything we buy has a warning label? Now, if you live life on the wild side like me, you might not pay that close of attention, but those labels are there for a reason. Sometimes they're actually helpful, but other times they make you wonder just who is buying this product. I mean, if they had to put a warning on it, I'm guessing it means that someone did the thing that they're warning against, right? Here's what I mean. These aren't the exact labels, but this is basically what we all see or hear. Don't put shampoo in your eyes. Duh. Don't spill hot coffee on yourself. Ouch. Or don't drive on the wrong side of the road. But in this series called Do Something, we're talking about injustice. So if justice is something fair, right, or equal, then injustice is the just opposite of that. So when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in this world that are not right, unfair, or unequal. Last week we said that the first step is seeing injustice. It's choosing to get close enough to listen to and learn about it from other people, to open our eyes and begin to notice injustice around us. But I think that seeing injustice should come with its own warning label, one that says, what do we do with difficult questions? Here's what I mean. Seeing injustice can leave us asking a lot of questions, both about the injustice itself and the God who's supposedly in control of the world where it happens. Maybe you see an injustice in this world and you wonder things like, why would that person say that? Or how could someone do that to someone else? Or what makes stuff like this happen? Or why isn't anyone doing something about it? Or maybe you've landed on a really hard question when it comes to injustice, a question that feels so difficult to answer. And that question is, why isn't God doing something about this? Maybe you feel nervous, I even said that out loud, because we're not supposed to even question God, right? After all, he's God and he can do whatever he wants. Or maybe you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I keep asking. You probably feel relieved that someone finally said it out loud. Or maybe this is the very reason you're still not sure about all this Jesus stuff. You can't imagine yourself being a Jesus follower if he's not going to do something about the brokenness you see around you. No matter where you are or what our world looks like right now, God is big enough to handle our questions, even the difficult ones. All sorts of people who have gone through all sorts of things have been trying to answer these questions since the beginning of time. So why do we keep asking? Because it bothers us. After all, how can a good God allow things like human trafficking, prejudice, poverty, racism to happen and do nothing? Thankfully, we don't have to guess or assume where God is in the midst of all this. We don't have to guess at what God is really like or if he really cares. We can look at his son Jesus, who is the best way to see what God is really like. Several people who knew Jesus personally and hung out with him took the time to write down what they saw and heard so that people like you and me, the ones who didn't get to see it with their own eyes, would know what happened. Today we're going to take a look at an eyewitness account of Matthew, a book written by one of Jesus' closest followers and friends. Sometimes in church we call this the Book of Matthew or the Gospel of Matthew. No matter what you call it, Matthew hung out with Jesus and knew what he was all about. Maybe that's why he took the time and wrote down this thing that he saw. Here's what he said. Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. See, Jesus was teaching, healing, and helping people as he shared the message of what God's kingdom is really like. See, he talked about things like the outcast being loved, the slaves being freed, the oppressed being rescued, and the hungry being fed. In other words, he's talking about justice. Everywhere he went, Jesus had something to say and do about people being treated unfairly or in a way that wasn't right. See, Matthew continues. He wrote, "When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd." See, Jesus modeled for us what God is really like when it comes to injustice. First, Jesus saw. He saw the injustice, the hurt, and the brokenness. And when he saw, Jesus cared. That's what compassion is about. So if you've ever wondered, God is for justice. In fact, thousands of years earlier, he said so through the prophet Isaiah. "For I, the Lord, love justice." So we know that God loves justice, got it. But that still doesn't answer the question, why doesn't he do something about the injustices around us today? Why doesn't he wave a magic wand or do that whole miracle thing he was so good at? This is great, because Matthew gives us a clue in the next verse. Look at what Jesus said next. He said to his disciples, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few." Okay, so maybe you don't talk a lot about harvesting and planting and gardening, but here, Jesus is talking about work. See, he lived in a farming community, so when he started talking about planting and harvesting, it wasn't weird. That kind of work required a lot of effort. So when he saw what was going on, Jesus had compassion, and he also responded by telling them it's time to get to work. He's basically saying there's plenty to be done, and there's plenty of room for more people to get involved in the work. Now, let me make this really personal for you and I. What if God has a plan to do something about injustice, and what if we are the plan? Like, what if the miracle Jesus has in mind isn't making injustice magically go away, but instead, it's about you and me doing the work to end injustice on his behalf? What if it's us responding to all the things he already cares about? What if the plan is us becoming more like him? I think it's possible, and here's why. See, the Apostle Paul, whose life was changed by Jesus, wrote letters to the early church and taught them what it looks like to be a Christian. And he used this word picture to describe the church. All of you together are Christ's body, and each one of you is a part of it. Paul uses the illustration of one body made up of all of its individual parts. Even though it may seem like the ear is independent from the toe, the whole body relies on each part in order to function as God designed it to. In the same way, God designed the body of Christ, or the church, to work together to help each other out. So when we're talking about injustice, it's not that God isn't there or doesn't care, but instead God is calling his church, his people, to be his hands and feet here on earth. In other words, God is doing something about injustice. Let me repeat that. God is doing something about injustice. Think about that. God is doing something already about racial injustice through us. God is doing something about violence towards women, and the plan is us. God is doing something about sex trafficking, hunger, poverty, modern day slavery, and all the injustices we see on a local level and on a global level. And we get to be a part of it. So the question is, will you participate in what he's already doing? If so, where do we start? Here are a couple of steps you can take to begin. The first step is to rethink what we think about injustice. In other words, it's to change our minds about the way we see God, the world, and ourselves when it comes to injustice. Maybe it's time to rethink what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Maybe you thought faith was about singing songs and showing up to church and praying. Now, those things are good things, but to follow Jesus is so much bigger than that. Following means you start to see the world like he sees it. You care about what he cares about, and you treat people the way he would treat people. Then you can begin to do something about the brokenness in this world because you know that it's what Jesus is calling you to do. You can also rethink your responsibility. Maybe you thought responding to injustice wasn't exactly a teenager thing. Or maybe you thought it was important to only care about certain ones. Maybe today is a day to start changing your idea about how injustice impacts us all. To start rethinking how you can think about what you can do personally in response to it. The second step is to change the questions you might be asking. Instead of asking, "Where is God?" ask, "Where am I?" Maybe the next step for you is to choose to be part of what God is already doing in the world. To ask God to begin to show you where you can start working towards justice in your community, your school, or in the world as a whole. Once you've taken these steps, it might be time to find a way to fight justice. What do you see that's breaking your heart? Step up, serve, give your time, give your energy, give your money. Take the skills, personality, the resources that God has given you and find ways to use them to help bring justice to the injustices that God has shown you. Who is working to fight injustice in that area? And how can you partner with them? Over and over again, we can see that the Bible teaches us that God cares deeply about injustice and wants us to do something about it. This means that his people should be known for being people who do something about injustice. So just imagine if we became known as a group of people who were the most compassionate, the most kind, the most just, the most resilient, the first to speak up, and the first to stand up for others experiencing injustice. Imagine the positive impact we could have in our community, our schools, and our world. Imagine the opportunities that we would have to show people that God is for them and God is for helping those who are experiencing injustices. This week in small group, I want you to think about this. What if that were true about your small group? What if that were true of your friend group? What if the Christians at your school or in your neighborhood were the most compassionate, the most kind, the brave, the most vocal about injustice? How might that change the way people see God? Imagine if the people you know would be more willing to believe God is doing something when it comes to injustice because they saw you doing something. And all because we know that even when it might not seem like it or might not feel like it, God is doing something about injustice.